All right, so here we go with this week's Torah portion, Tavo, and I want us to turn in our scripture to Deuteronomy 28 verse 47 is where we're going to start. And it says, because you did not serve Yehovah your Elohim with joy and gladness of heart for the abundance of everything, therefore you shall serve your enemies, whom Yehovah will send against you in hunger, in thirst, in nakedness, and in need of everything, and he will put a yoke of iron on your neck until he has destroyed you. Okay, when I look at this, I think of a command that most of us do not even think about, is serving with joy. Because most of us don't walk around very joyful this day and this hour. We're just like the children of Israel. We complain and we gripe and we throw fits and we do all sorts of things, but do we serve him with joy? There's a quote from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin that says, joy is the infallible sign of the presence of God. Well, he tells us to serve with joy. And I think there's some merit to that, because when you think about joy, when somebody says that they believe in Yeshua or they believe in Jesus, and if they walk around broken and depressed with their head put down and stuff, what kind of witness is that? Most people say, well, but that's not what they expect to see. If somebody says those words, they expect to see someone that's full of joy. Even if they don't believe, they expect that, because there's something about serving him that's supposed to make us different and set apart. And we're supposed to be happy and joyful. Yes. So I want you to understand that that should be a marker of his people. Is this something revelational? No, but it's a reminder. Maybe even it could even be chastisement if you want to look at that, because how many of us serve with joy all the time? How many of us do that? Do we? I would say probably not. And it's actually this command. It is enjoying. We were supposed to enjoy the fruit of the garden, all except for one tree. When we look at Genesis 2:16, it says, and Yehovah your Elohim commanded the man, saying, of every tree in the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for the day that you shall eat, you shall surely die. He's telling us to freely eat. We're supposed to enjoy what he's given us. But so many times we are so stuck on what's going wrong or what battle we're going through that we don't enjoy anything. Well, I'm going to Shabbat. I have to do this or I have to do that. Where's the joy in that? And I want to say, when you look at the word joy that's used here in this verse, it's sameach. But it's very similar to another word for joy, because sameach, I believe, is Strong's 8056, but the simcha, and that's another word for joy. And let's just look at that, because the only thing that's different is the hey at the end. Because when you look at simcha and even part of sameach, we see that shin and that mem and that het. And when you look at those letters together, you see the sheen as the teeth or the fire, and the mem as fluid and water and move and firmament. And it's also the number 40, which are trials and testing. So that to me relates, there's something related. There's something to do with that in this word joy, trials and testing. And then you see that het, which is the fence. But it's also the number 8, which is regeneration, the new beginning. And so we have all of this picture here. And then you add the hey for the simcha. And I know that's one letter different than the sameach, but that also signifies a window. But there's still going to be a relation to these words. And so when you have that put together, it's like joy is a fire that takes us through the trials and testing and flows as water through the fence and becomes the window of his goodness. So, but even if you remove the hay, the window, joy is like the fire that takes us through the trials and testing. It flows like water through the fence. Or through the fence, and then his goodness and grace fall out the window. Guys, that's pretty strong. So why do we fill our lives with everything but joy? We fill it with complaining. We fill it. We are so busy that we don't even stop to smell the roses, so to speak. And if we would enjoy what he's given us, and not wish we had this and that and the other, we might be at a different place. Because when we're looking at we're not joyfully serving. That's what Adam and Eve did. Oh, wait, but we can't have this. He commands us to have joy. He commands us to serve passionately for him and with joy. And when that's a great gift. Well, why would we serve? Well, you don't understand. Well, do you have life? Then you need to serve with joy. And life, when you look at life, what is it? If something is living, that means it's changing, it's ever growing. And that's what's really interesting is growth is very similar to joy in its Hebrew word. In that specific one, sameach is joy, but growth is zamach. Okay. Are those similar? You can hear the similarities in those. So life and joy and growth are sort of connected together. There's something about having the joy of Yah within us. Even if we are in trials and testing, which is in that letter mem, that's part of joy. That we need to look at it. Are we supposed to have joy only when everything's going great? No. It says in his word that we're supposed to have joy when we keep his commandments. 1 John 5:3, for this is the love of Yah, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments aren't burdensome. So it should be joyful. It should transform us. It should set us apart from the rest of the world. We're supposed to have joy when we study the Torah. Yeah, when we study the Torah, because the sages actually say that the Torah came down from its heavenly perch and became united with man. When you hear about that, that points directly to Yeshua. Psalm 19:7 says the Torah of Yah is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of Yah is sure, making the wise the simple. The statutes of Yahovah are right, rejoicing the heart. So the commandments are supposed to bring us joy, not oh, well, the word says this, so I can't enjoy that. No, that's we're serving something else, and we're letting someone else have our mind if we act like that. It says in James 1:2, what about joy, my brethren? Count it all joy when you go through various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. Oh, that steps on toes, doesn't it? Do we find joy even in the midst of as we're walking through the wilderness, as we're walking through a trial? Or do we constantly complain and tell other people what the problem is and justify why we're there, or why we shouldn't be there? Because Yeshua served with joy. We're all supposed to have joy in us, knowing that Yeshua is the most important reason that we have joy. Guess what? He gives us life, and that more abundantly, eternal life through him. Philippians 3:1 says, finally, my brothers, rejoice in Adonai, rejoice in Yah, rejoice in Messiah Yeshua, and have no confidence in your flesh, because your flesh isn't going to get you anywhere. Remember, I said joy is the fire that takes us through the trials. So why do we sit back and complain and gripe and forget that he's created all of this for us? That we're on this journey, and it may be in a hard place for us, but there's a reason, and it's going to transform us even more beautifully. And it's the opportunity for his miracle power to shine, because here's another reason that joy should be so integral in our lives. Our kids are watching us. And if they watch us serve him and walk out his command, a specific commandment or all the commandments, as we're pursuing him, and they don't see us walking with joy, then they are going to observe that Yah, serving Yah and having joy and laughter and enjoying what he's given, they don't go together, that it's hard, that it's bitter. And there may be hardship and bitterness, but remember, we're supposed to find the joy in the midst of that, because our children are not going to see value in the Torah if all of in Yeshua, if all they see in us is a downtrodden spirit, is a defeated spirit. Because the lack of joy will do exactly what happened to Mr. and Mrs. Adam. And that's going to bring you into disobedience. And what does disobedience result in? Well, this whole Torah portion is about, it's partly about blessing and curses. It's going to walk you right into the curses in your life, because we have skipped joy. We don't even think about joy as being a command. We're, serve him with joy. But what is the source of our joy? The source of our joy is the ability, it's the opportunity to carry out his commands, to be a servant, to be one with him, to spend time with him. That is our joy. That's the source of our joy, is Yeshua. It always will be. And our children are watching. Are we going to send forth that curse to the next generation because we refuse to serve him in the way that he's called us to serve him? Are we going to do that? Are we going to walk with that fruit of the Spirit, with joy in our heart, pushing aside bitterness, pushing aside our excuses, pushing aside all of those things that get in the way? Because even that things that the enemy might throw in our path, we still cast our cares upon him. As I talked a couple weeks ago, it's like getting a fastball and throwing it as fast as you can for it, never letting it come back. That's what casting your cares is. Another reason for joy. We don't have to carry that stuff along with us, but yet Yah's people seem to be broken down with their head bent down, downtrodden, because we don't see joy as an option in our life because of what we're walking out. That's not what his word says. Count it all joy. Count it all joy. My people who do not serve with joy, he places a curse on us. Guys, or we do it ourselves because we open the door, because we're serving in a way contrary to what he's asked us. We need to be a people that are so set apart that, this whole time, the world out here is hard, but we are a joyful people. It sets you apart. It sets me apart. And it shows that we serve a different God than everyone else. We serve a God, a Yah who we can trust in, who we know gets us to the other side. That is a reason to rejoice. That is a reason for joy, because he gives us life and that more abundantly, and we rest in him. And that is why we are set apart. Do you walk in joy, or do you enjoy his creation? Do you understand that joy overrides every circumstance, or do you let the circumstance override your joy?
Good. Very good, Sandy. That's some really pointing points. Mark, come back and join us here. And let me hear what you have to say about joy.
Well, it doesn't have to be about joy. It's about serving. It's about,
all of it. It's all about that. Yeah.
No, it's got to be about serving with joy. I got the joy down in my heart. Down in my heart. Down in my heart. Yeah. All
You're
right.
more spiritual. Yeah. You're more spiritual than I am, Mark, because the song that was going through my head is that joy. We had joy. We had fun. We had seasons in the sun. I don't remember the rest of the words, but that's what hit my mind.
I've always thought that I was much more spiritual than you, John. So it just confirms it.
Well, the one that went through my head, and Twyla, if she's there in the chat, will be able to say, and hello, Dane and Chandra and Twyla.
Chandra from Trinidad.
Yeah,
that's cool.
That's great. But here it was joy unspeakable and full of glory, full of glory, full of, I've got the joy. And that one, that's a scripture song from
the 80s
or 70s or 80, early 80s, something like that. Yeah.
And we got.
So you're the only lost one.
I'm the, pray for me.
Hold up just a second. John, you go. I got to take care of some business here.
Okay. So what I was just thinking about some different things. I was thinking about the whole concept of joy, because it's actually something that is a fruit. It is a fruit of the Spirit. And when we think about, one of the things that we talked about in a Torah portion a couple of weeks ago is about how men are like trees, or trees are men, when we talk about it metaphorically within the scripture. And which brought me over to Revelation chapter 22, where in verse 1 and 2 it says, "And he showed me a river of the water of life, clear as crystal, coming from the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the middle of its street and on either side of the river was the tree of life, bearing 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit every month, and its leaves of the trees for the healing of the nations." And I was just thinking about when we're really looking at it, when you go back to the garden, we know what the tree of life is, but essentially is that with Yeshua we become a tree of life. Now, we're not the tree of life, but it is that if men are like trees, we see the metaphorical relationship there. But the fact that a tree, and we also have it over in Psalm chapter 1, talking about trees that are fruitful, that are by the river. And if we are truly like that tree that's planted by the river, that is taking in what is the river that's coming from the throne, other than that we often see that the Spirit of the living God is like a river flowing from the throne. It is often equated with water, springs of life flowing up from our belly, all of those type of metaphors that we talk about. And how it is that the fruit of our lives, as if we are trees, I mean, Paul brings that into the picture in Galatians chapter 5, verse 22, that the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. These are fruit that should be manifesting in our life when we're planted by the river of life.
No matter what the circumstances.
No matter what the circumstances, always bearing fruit every month. And that our leaves, and you think about leaves, our very hands are meant for a healing of the nations. And so, I mean, I've also often thought, not metaphorically speaking, but eating the leaves of the tree of life will bring healing. But metaphorically speaking, the leaves are our hands that bring the healing, but the fruit that is produced when we're rooted and we're getting our nutrients, our life source from that river, as our roots go down deep, then we will bear forth. It just becomes part of us. The fruitfulness of our life is joy, is love, is peace, is patience, is kindness. It's all of these different things, but it's absorbed and it comes out of us. We're transformed to be that way. It's not like we're trying to act that way, but it is part of our being to have joy in our life. And therefore, what does the enemy want to do? He wants to bring in different things that will eat away at the fruit of our lives. And we think about where it says the locusts, all these different locusts that come in to destroy and to eat up everything. When we recognize, one of the ways we can recognize that a locust is coming in and eating away our fruit is to say, are we manifesting that fruit? Are we manifesting joy in our life? Are we manifesting these things that the Father has put in us? And are those branches getting corrupted? Maybe we need to get some pruning going on and trimmed off so that we can become more fruitful. And maybe that's some of the things that we can see metaphorically what's happening when we go through trials in our life, that I don't feel joyful. I don't feel shalom. I don't feel love. Well, you know what? It's not that we feel it. Feeling follows the will, and our choices of what we make, we decide that this is our life. This is part of our fruitfulness. Therefore, I'm not going to let circumstances take control.
Well, it says in the word that the joy of the Lord is our strength.
The joy of the Lord is our strength.
So where's our strength coming from? It's the joy of serving. It's the joy of Yah.
Yeah. So there you go. So that's my 2 cents on that one, is some things that I've been thinking about. Yeah, Mark.
I think that was worth like 3 cents or more, brother, at least. I really do. Joy. I actually didn't go look up the Brit Hadashah beforehand, but I did go check it out. And it's interesting. Of course, he's always apply Matthew 4:13 through 24. It's Torah Portion's website. It's all messed up. A couple of parts here. Yeshua calls the first disciples while walking by the Sea of Galilee. He saw 2 brothers, fishermen. I'm scanning here. I read it a while ago, and it goes along with this. Immediately they left their nets and followed him, and going on from where he saw the 2 brothers, he saw John and all of them. Immediately they left the boat and followed him. And he went throughout all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction among the people. So his fame spread throughout all Syria. And they brought him all the sick whose afflictions were various diseases and pains, those oppressed by demons, those having seizures and paralytics, and he healed them. What joy! That's, I read those things. To me, all I got to do is read what Yeshua did, and I have joy. And, I know Sandy's heard me say this from the millennials, the millennial time that we've spent together doing shows. But I suggest that we all read the crucifixion account from the time Yeshua was arrested to the end of all four Gospels at least once a month. I maybe pick one Gospel a month and read from the time he's arrested till the end of the book. And if we would do that and get the understanding of why we are who we are, what more joy could there possibly be? I mean, you don't want to find joy in the death. Especially of our Messiah. We don't want to find joy, but that's the ultimate joy. Because without that death of Yeshua, our Messiah, we can't have the salvation which produces our joy. And to me, I think one of the reasons we don't have joy is because we don't keep ever prevalent in our lives what the Messiah has done for us to allow us to live this life. You see what I'm saying? That's where we lose our joy, is because we allow ourselves to get caught up in everything else except what Yeshua did. Whether it even just open the New Testament, one of the Gospels, and just start reading from anywhere should give you joy. Especially because we're seeing what Yeshua did. Our whole life, everything that we do is all based on what Yeshua did for us. Is that not right? Is that not true? Or yes. What? It's not anything we've done. There's not one little fraction of something that we've done to cause us to have joy. It all has to do with the Messiah did for us. And so if we're not keeping that ever prevalent in our lives, the joy we have is made up. That's just the way I can kind of see it. It's there's other stuff that we have. We can have faith and we can have made up faith. But if it comes from our Messiah, then it's real faith. There's so much counterfeit what we should be living our lives that we need to recognize the difference between the counterfeit and what's real as far as what Messiah has done. And that within itself, that's where my joy comes from, is keeping the Messiah's works for me prevalent in my life. That's where my joy comes from.
Well, I really like what you said. And when you talked about we don't rejoice in the death of Messiah, yet that's where our joy comes from. And with that, we know a seed must die to bring forth life. And then I talked about life and growth being connected to joy. And and so that we've just got to remember how that plays together, just as you said. Hallelujah for that. And joy is, if somebody is joyful, it's not something you can really fake, because you can see truth in that. And you can see there's a glimmer in the eye. There's a smile that's not a fake smile. There's something about pure joy coming through somebody, even in the midst of trial, that is a witness, that is an ed to everybody else. And therefore, Why do you think he commands that in our lives? Because it is a witness and a testimony to everyone else around us. And yet his people mostly don't walk around that way.
That's right.
And so we are not being a witness to the world. We are not being the set apart ones. We look just like everybody else, because literally the joy in our countenance will shine forth beyond any circumstance. And it literally is almost contagious, because what are you smiling about? Why are your eyes sparkling? What's gleaming? It gives us that opportunity to tell them why, but instead we are just the opposite. So guys, let's truly find it. It seems simple, but it's not, and small, but it's not small. This isn't a small thing. It is how we carry on our lives each and every day.
Very good. Very good.
Oh, we're being a witness to the world, all right. It's just a lot of bad witnessing.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, okay. All right. Since you brought that up, before we move on to our next segment for the uncensored news, which we need to say we're gonna get there, but I do want to say this is that there are those of us that are Messianic, those of us that are Hebrew roots oriented, and which is nothing more than going to the very roots of our faith, doing what Yeshua did.
Believe in the whole word.
Believe in the whole word. I mean, it's just simply digging in deeper. And but here's the issue, and I think it was even brought up earlier. It was in the war room, where it was like stop capitalizing on these petty differences. If you,
prayer,
it was a prayer this morning, and I was like, that's right on. Because there's so many people, it just brings division. Well, you don't say the word just right. You don't say this just right. I believe it this way. Okay. Yeah. Now get this. There's people out there that call themselves Hebrew roots, and they've got themselves into political controversies that are destroying the very basic bottom line basics of our faith. And yeah, y'all don't know. I came across something. It's been a few weeks ago, but a guy that was he called himself Hebrew roots, but he was defaming some major alternative news commentators and just going after them with lies and stuff. And it's, guys, let's just major on the majors. Let's stay focused on what we need to stay focused on. And I love what you said, Mark, is in regards to where's our vision? If we lose our vision, if we forget that Yeshua's got to be the center of everything, and reading those gospels like they are helps us keep that vision straight and keep it focused, then we are going to go into the weeds, and we're going to go off into the areas that we don't need to be going on to, because we want to make a name for ourselves, or because we want to be, it's not that everybody wants to be controversial, but we want to be right. We have to be exactly right. That's not what it's about. What it's about is Yeshua. And we're all going to be coming together with him. And all these little petty stuff is lack of vision. It's majoring on minors, and it doesn't matter. It does not matter. Mm-hmm. And so there's my soapbox for the day. Mm-hmm. And
I agree.
Very, very important that we keep that focus right. Sandy, you just brought in a lot of great stuff, and I really appreciate you jumping in this morning with the Torah portion. And we miss Eddie and Tammy.
Blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.
No one can come to you except through his love. Yeshua is the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to you except through his love. Torah, Torah, Tova. Torah, Torah, Tova. Torah, Torah.